Chapter 61. Still angry about last night. Elite Haven Towers building, where Neil lived. It was early morning, the sun just peeking out of the horizon. Few people were still lazing around in bed, sleeping, but Neil wasn't. He hadn't slept a wink after he returned from Whispering Way last night. His anger had brewed up into a mountain by the time he drove back to his apartment. Even the night shift receptionists and security guards had felt the overwhelming presence of the mysterious man they had all come to steer clear of because of his temper. They had all held their breaths when he was passing by the lobby, with a bleeding forehead and a deadly look in his gray eyes. However, one of the night shift receptionists, who was new to working in the luxurious apartment building, went out of her way and remarked with a flirtatious tone, "Sir, would you like me to assist you with tending to your wound?" She had flashed him an inviting, sexy smile as he stopped in his tracks and glared at her. But instead of backing away and simply shutting her mouth, as the others who were familiar with the man's temper gave her warning signs, the receptionist had walked up to him and said in a whisper, "Perhaps I could warm your bed tonight as well, handsome." The unfortunate receptionist was fired this morning, and Neil made sure she never had the opportunity to work elsewhere again for trying to flirt with him. His cold eyes bored into the distance as he ran on the treadmill, his tattooed chest glistening with sweat under the harsh gym lights. The rhythmic thud of his footsteps echoed in the training room. His forehead was now masked with a stern plaster. If anyone were to see the look in his eyes, they would tremble away in fear. Even though it was morning, his irritation from last night had no signs of coming down. The image of Mia stepping in front of the guy who dared throw a stone at him flashed sharply into his head, and without a second thought, he increased the pace of the treadmill. The sharp ring of his phone interrupted the monotony of his workout. Neil halted, stepping off the treadmill with an air of authority. Beads of sweat trailed down his forehead as he cleaned himself with a towel. He took his phone and glanced at the caller. Seeing that it was Liam, he answered the call. Neil spoke with an unwavering detachment that would make a man shiver in fear. "Have you done what I asked you to do, Liam?" Liam, who was already used to his friend's temperament and behavior, never wavered at the tone of his voice, or his rudeness and aloofness. His playful voice cracked through the phone as he replied, "Yeah, Neil, but seriously, why are you suddenly interested in this man named Owen?" he asked in curiosity. Last night, when Liam was already sleeping, Neil's phone call had woken him up. Despite the fact that they hadn't spoken to each other after the day Neil had thrown him out of his condo, Liam had picked up his call. It wasn't the first time he had been thrown out of his friend's house. It had happened many times, to the extent he was now used to it and found it to be a normal thing. Whenever Liam knew whatever he wanted to say to his friend was something that would irk him, he would always prepare himself for being sent out. So technically, he had seen that one coming that night. When he picked up the call, Neil had told him to do a background check on some man called Owen in Whispering Way. Liam had frowned and said, "Are you forgetting that I am your friend and not James, your assistant? Call James and tell him to do." Before Liam had even completed his words, Neil's angry voice had sliced through the phone. "I swear to everything that's holy. If you dare hang up on me, Liam, I'll strip you of your manhood. I knew about James before I fucking called you. Now do as I said and send me the report in the morning." Saying that, Neil had hung up on Liam last night. And at that moment, Liam had known that some dumbass idiot in Whispering Way had caught death for himself, because it was obvious Neil was enraged beyond anything. "What did you find out about his background?" The coldness in Neil's voice stifled any further attempts at humor, demanding the information with stern authority. And Liam knew not to crack any jokes at this moment, where his friend's anger hadn't seemed to calm down. Owen Sullivan is a 26-year-old university student in his final year. He was born and raised in Whispering Way. However, when my assistant dug into his past, the man seemed to be an interesting person with a shady background, Liam reported with a hint of amusement in his voice. "What's interesting about him?" Neil inquired indifferently. "He has a police record in his teenage years. He was arrested 3 times at the age of 13. He had a great talent when it came to smuggling stolen things and selling them at a very young age. He is also..." "That's enough. I've gotten the information I want to know about him. Make sure he never graduates from that university he's currently attending, and if he has any side jobs, make him lose it. I don't want him to get into any other institution in Zen." Neil issued his demand in a nonchalant voice and attitude. Last night he had used every bit of strength to restrain himself from shooting Owen to his death. And recalling what a certain someone had said to him yesterday, Sometimes, she had said calmly, one has to hold back, knowing their actions would have a bad aftermath. Not all problems are resolved with physical retaliation. He had indeed held back, knowing if he were to lay a hand on Owen last night, the young man wouldn't have survived. And that would interfere with his mission if the police got involved. However, just because he had held back his physical retaliation, it didn't mean he wouldn't ruin the man's life. Did he really think breaking a skin on him meant he had triumphed against Neil Weiner? Not a chance. Neil Weiner never left any stone unturned. Liam, who heard Neil's orders, didn't argue or question his reasons for destroying the poor man's future. He knew his friend wouldn't do things without his reasons. And whoever this Owen Sullivan was, must have messed with his friend. All right, I will see to it, Liam assured. But before Neil could hang up the call, Liam spoke again. I have also seen to your earlier message yesterday afternoon. Even though they hadn't spoken after that night, Neil had sent him another message yesterday afternoon. I've called James and gave him your orders about securing Mia Harrison's scholarship in Ivy Grove through your company's influence so they wouldn't know who had done it. The more Neil asked him to do things for this Mia Harrison, the more Liam got curious about the young woman. But knowing what had happened the night he tried to give his friend advice about giving love a chance, Liam held back his curiosity. Furthermore, he had some more important information to give Neil. He continued, Neil, I think you should at least turn on your main cell phone. James told me yesterday that he has been trying to reach you to tell you about what your cousin, Fabian, is up to in Galvera Enterprise. When Neil had decided to take his military career instead of becoming the CEO of his late father's company, the Galvera Enterprise, he had left his distant cousins in charge of the company and only checked on it once in a while when he traveled to Mirage Mesa. He also attended some board meetings that needed his presence for signing any deals that needed his signature. But for 2 years now, Neil hadn't checked on the company or anything his cousins were doing with it, as he had assigned James, his assistant and spy, to keep an eye on the company in his absence. And because he had been using a different cell phone and number for his disguise, he hadn't turned on his main cell phone. What is Fabian doing in the company that James couldn't handle until he calls me? Neil asked nonchalantly, as he wasn't that much interested in anything that had to do with the company as long as it was flourishing properly without his presence. Hearing his non-interested voice, Liam chuckled in amusement, knowing what he was about to say would shock Neil back to his senses and rush him into dealing with his cousin. Fabian is planning to sell your company shares to the well-known Kelvin Rodrigo Enterprises in Mirage Mesa. James had tried to reach you to tell you this, but your phone hasn't been reachable. You better do something about that cousin of yours before he sells away all your late father's hard work. Neil had already stopped listening to what Liam was saying after hearing what he said about his cousin's plan to sell his company share to Kelvin Rodrigo, who Neil had been suspecting to be responsible for his father's death. But because of his lack of evidence of the man's involvement with Da Kroll organization, Neil hadn't been able to get the man to justice. But now, his cousin dared to go behind his back and planned to sell away his company shares to his enemy. I will kill that bastard Fabian if I get to Mirage Mesa. His eyes darkened. Do me a favor. Tell James to get the men to prepare my jet immediately. I will fly down to Mirage Mesa today. Chapter 62. Securing her scholarship. Mia woke up with a heavy heart and a suffocating sensation in her chest due to what occurred the previous night. She didn't feel the motivation to even leave her bed, but the realization of needing to attend school compelled her to rise. Uncertain if she still held her student status at Ivy Grove Institution after the cafeteria incident, she had to go to school to confirm whether or not she had lost her scholarship. Following her argument with Owen last night, Mia had retreated to her room and played her guitar until her fingertips turned numb. She deliberately avoided thinking about her best friend and his hurtful words, as well as the strange expression in his eyes while he forcefully grabbed her arm. It might be time for them to grow up and lead separate lives, as she had granted him too much freedom to intrude on her personal affairs, to the point where he viewed her as some possession he could control. Mia had never meddled in Owen's personal life. Since they were very young, she had refrained from questioning or insulting him for his actions. Even when he was falsely accused and arrested 3 times in a year for selling stolen goods, she had believed his claims of being framed and never said anything to hurt his feelings. However, yesterday, he went as far as calling her a whore. Mia dismissed all thoughts of Owen from her mind and began to prepare for school. She had more than one reason to go to school today. Apart from checking if she was still a student in Ivy Grove, she also wanted to check on Mr. Bennett. After what had happened yesterday, she doubted if he would ever want to speak to her again. However, she wanted to make sure his forehead was all right. The wound looked pretty bad last night, with so much blood oozing out of it. The fact that he had driven away without doing anything made her even more nervous. She might not have known him for long, but she knew he had a terrifyingly bad temper. She had expected him to beat up Owen to near death yesterday, but he didn't do that and had left instead. Mia looked down at the gray shirt and trousers lying on her bed, the clothes he'd given her to wear yesterday. She picked them up, realizing they still had his lingering, expensive scent on them. Apart from his gray eyes, she was starting to like his intoxicating scent as well. She held the clothes to her nose, inhaling the scent. A deep shade of red surged to her cheeks as the scent only made a scene of her waking up to find his head nestled against her breast flashed to her mind. As if being burned, she hastily released the clothes and threw them back on her bed with an embarrassed cry. She hadn't been able to dwell on that scene because of all the incidents last night, but remembering it now, she felt embarrassed to the extent she wanted to hide away from him forever. That was so embarrassing. She was literally lying naked on his bed with his arm holding her waist in his sleep. How was she going to face him again after that? Of course, she would have to face him again, just like she had been composed throughout their ride to Whispering Way last night. Though he had offered her the job of being his cook and cleaner, they hadn't gotten the chance to even discuss the days she would go to his place and start working. Speaking of the work, she didn't know if he would still want her to work for him after what she had made him go through for the whole of yesterday. Mia sighed in frustration. She should probably hurry to school before she blew up her own mind with so much thinking. She made a mental note to give his clothes for dry cleaning so she wouldn't ruin the expensive fabric by washing it herself before returning them. Mia quickly wore her comfortable t-shirt and jeans. She wasn't going to wear a dress to school since she wasn't sure of the exact situation in school. She tied her hair up into a ponytail and applied a little lip gloss to her lips. Grabbing her bag and phone, she hurried out of the room. When Mia arrived at school, she was surprised to see that none of the students were giving her the dirty looks they were shooting her way yesterday. Instead, they were looking at her with what seemed to be envy. She was even more surprised to still find her posters about the contest still hanging up on the school boards. Before going to class, Mia decided to check with the scholarship office to inquire about her scholarship status to be sure if it hadn't been withdrawn by the Fosters, who were the backbone of Ivy Grove. Mia nervously approached the university's scholarship office, a room tucked away in the administrative building. The door bore a small sign that read, "Financial Aid and Scholarships." Upon entering, she found a quiet waiting area with a few students engrossed in paperwork. Mia approached the reception desk where a friendly administrative assistant greeted her. "Hi, I'm Mia Harrison. I wanted to check on the status of my scholarship. I heard there might be some issues." She lied so she could get the woman to check for her. She didn't want to go to class and embarrass herself. "Of course, Mia, please have a seat, and I'll see if someone is available to help you," said the friendly assistant. Mia waited anxiously, her mind swirling with nervous prayer. A few moments later, a scholarship advisor named Ms. Adams emerged from an adjacent office. Ms. Adams looked at Mia with a faint smile. "Hello, Miss Harrison. How can I assist you today?" I've been receiving a scholarship, and I heard there might be some changes. I wanted to make sure everything is okay." "I understand. Let me pull up your information. Please provide me with your student ID." Mia handed over her ID, and Ms. Adams diligently typed away on her computer. The suspense filled Mia until the woman looked up with a deep frown and said quietly, "Miss Harrison, it seems there have been a few changes in your scholarship. Mr. Foster had requested for your scholarship to be withdrawn yesterday." Mia felt her heart sink. Of course, she had expected something like this to happen after what she had done to Diane yesterday. However, she had expected that Diane would be at least considerate enough not to involve her father in this, considering she was the one to start the conflict in the cafeteria. But the girl proved her wrong. And now she would have to return home and deliver the bad news to her mother, and... "Don't be sad, Miss Harrison. You are still a student of Ivy Grove. Your original scholarship had been withdrawn. However, you have a new sponsor for your tuition fees this morning. A gentleman named Xavier Galvera from Mirage Mesa has graciously taken up the responsibility to fund your education until you graduate." Mia's eyes widened in surprise. She was shocked beyond words. "Xavier Galvera? I don't even know him. Why would he do this?" she asked in disbelief. She had never even heard that name. so why would he secure her tuition fees? Ms. Adams smiled as she noticed the disbelief in the young woman's face. Though she didn't know why Mr. Foster had called in to withdraw the girl's scholarship, she could tell it was due to Diane's matter. Ms. Adams had also grown up in a lower-class family. She knew how a scholarship in an expensive school could mean so much to someone who couldn't afford to pay their tuition fees. And the fact that Mr. Foster had requested to withdraw the girl's scholarship for his daughter's sake had made her feel bad. However, Mia was fortunate enough to have caught Mr. Galvera's attention somehow for him to help her this morning. Ms. Adams then said, "Miss Harrison, you are lucky to get a second chance. Mr. Galvera is a well-known businessman in Mirage Mesa, and with him standing as a backing to your education, I believe you have nothing to worry about now. Not even Mr. Foster can withdraw your scholarship now," she assured. Mia didn't know whether to cry or laugh in relief. She would have lost her scholarship if it wasn't for this generous man. I don't know what to say. Please convey my heartfelt thanks to Mr. Galvera. This means the world to me. Ms. Adams smiled. "I will certainly do that, Miss Harrison. If you have any questions or need further assistance, feel free to reach out. Congratulations on this opportunity, and best of luck with your studies." Mia left the office, her worries replaced by a newfound appreciation for the generosity of this Xavier Galvera, who had not only fixed the issue but had become an unexpected guardian of her educational dreams. She couldn't help but wonder who the man was and why the name Xavier sounded awfully familiar to her somehow. How did he even know of her existence when he was from Mirage Mesa? Chapter 63. What a coincidence. After Mia's classes, she went to sit under the school's shed with Rain, who was saying, "Last night, I was worried about you when Owen called to ask if you were with me. Where did you go with Mr. Bennett yesterday, anyway?" "It's a long story I wouldn't want to talk about for now, Rain," Mia replied, as she played with the straw in her juice cup. She then changed the topic. "I was expecting to come to school to still find people hating on me, but I was surprised to see them all minding their business." "Did something happen yesterday when I was away?" she asked, curiously leaning towards her friend. She was aware of how the students in Ivy Grove never knew to mind their business when it came to something that has to do with the school's most popular girl, Diane Foster. Rain flashed her a girlish grin. "A lot of things happened. After you left with Mr. Bennett yesterday, all the students in the cafeteria couldn't help but laugh at Diane because of how their Adonis Leo had made you hit her face. You know how Diane had been spreading the words to everyone that she is Mr. Bennett's girlfriend after he took her out to eat at that restaurant. Most of the students in the cafeteria had even helped bully you because Diane was dating someone like Leo, and they didn't want to get on hers or his bad side. And you know what? Someone posted some unedited photos of Whispering Way on the school forum yesterday evening. When everyone saw that the town wasn't as bad as the first photo made it look, I guess everyone decided to mind their business and shut up. Though a few who are loyal to Diane are still trying to throw mud at you, while the rest who are crazy about the hot, handsome professor are trying to get on your good side by placing a vote for you again. Haven't you seen all this on the school forum?" Mia, who had been listening to her friend's words about what she had missed yesterday, shook her head in bemusement. She hadn't logged into the forum because she was afraid to find all the students trying to insult her and bash her for being poor. But it turned out everything had been fixed overnight without her having to do anything. Who could have posted another unedited photo of Whispering Way Street to clear those rumors, though? "Do you know who posted the pictures yesterday?" Mia asked. Rain shook her head. "No, I don't. The account was new with no profile pic." "Well, perhaps it was someone who admires you, who knows? Why are you worrying about who posted the pictures when you should be happy that you weren't disqualified from the competition?" Rain exclaimed with a beaming smile. "I have talked to Carlos about taking care of the school newspapers about you. And you are still on the run, bestie." She slapped Mia's shoulder in excitement. "Ow!" Mia rubbed her shoulder and glanced at her friend, with amusement dancing in her eyes. "Why do you always like to hit people next to you when you laugh or feel excited about something?" He. Don't mind me. It's a habit I inherited from my mother. By the way, everyone is starting to shop for their dresses for the upcoming event. I plan to go and shop today after school. Will you go with me?" Rain asked with a hopeful look in her green eyes. She already had tons of dresses in her wardrobe, but knowing that her friend, who was going to participate in the competition, hadn't gotten a dress for some reason, Rain had planned to make Mia go with her to the mall today because she planned to buy them both a dress. However, not wanting it to look like some charity case, Rain had requested for her to accompany her. Seeing that Mia looked like she was going to refuse, Rain pouted childishly and clasped her hands like a desperate child begging for candy from her mother. Please don't say no, you are my only bestie. If you don't go with me, no one will. Mia sighed in defeat. All right, I will go with you to shop. Now stop giving me those cute puppy eyes. She laughed. Rain's expression brightened up immediately. Yay! Let me go and get my phone and call my chauffeur to come and pick us up. I'll be right back. Mia watched as her friend happily skipped off to retrieve her phone from the locker room where she had forgotten her bag earlier. Since Mia had nothing to occupy her time at home, it was better for her to escort Rain to shop. However, a sense of unease and concern washed over her because Mr. Ice Cube had not shown up at school today. Immediately after their classes ended, she had gone to his office, only to find it locked. She had even attempted to call him, but his cell phone was turned off. The possibility that the stone that hit his head had caused some harm crossed her mind, as why else would he not come to school when he had even managed to attend despite being shot before? Was it possible that he was at the hospital? Those thoughts had been swirling in her mind the entire day. She had even planned to check his condo after school to confirm, but now that she was going out with Rain, she would have to do it later, or maybe even tomorrow if he still didn't show up. When Rain's chauffeur pulled the limo in front of a huge, luxurious shopping center in Zen City, and the pair climbed down the car, Mia couldn't help but admire the building's exterior. It was a tall, sleek skyscraper shopping mall, one of the largest in the country, covering over 1.3 million square feet. It features over 250 stores, as well as a variety of dining options, including restaurants, cafes, and food courts. She knew all of this because of her journalism assignments of fishing out juicy stories about influential families in Zen. She'd had times where she would have to do research about their daily affairs, and this mall was where most of them liked to shop. She had never been to the mall, but she'd seen pictures of it. And today that she was there, she couldn't help but admire the place with an awestruck expression. If it wasn't for the fact that Rain had pleaded for her to accompany her, Mia would have made a quick U-turn, seeing how fancy the mall looked. She would never be able to afford something from such a place, even if she were to work 100 part-time jobs. As the two walked into the luxurious mall, they stopped at the threshold when they noticed a small crowd gathered around a tall man in a business suit, like he was some celebrity, and they were eager to take his autograph and his picture. As Mia was trying to figure out which celebrity had decided to grace the mall with his presence on the same day she escorted her friend to shop, she heard Rain exclaim in annoyed disbelief. "What the hell is Jason doing here?" Mia frowned as she looked away from the man and glanced at her friend. "You mean that is Jason, your older brother from the military? The control freak?" Even though Mia hadn't met her friend's brother in person, she had heard Rain complain about him all the time. He had recently returned from the military and was now working in their father's company for the meantime. Though Jason wasn't as famous as Neil Wayner in the country, he was also known to have done a lot of remarkable things in the business world and in the military. However, compared to the mysterious Neil, Jason liked to showcase himself and take credit for all the missions he had accomplished in the country. Jason's life wasn't private. He always had one reason or the other to be on TV shows and the news headlines. He liked the attention he received from people. And Mia was surprised to see that he looked even more good-looking in person than he was on the news. "What a coincidence your brother decided to be at the same mall you planned to shop," Mia remarked, as she noticed her friend's displeased expression upon seeing her brother here. "This is no coincidence," Rain replied, recalling that last night Jason had acted strangely nice towards her while asking her some dumb questions about the professors in their university. She hadn't wanted to even give him a chance, but seeing that her arrogant brother was trying to have a casual conversation with her, Rain had been happy to tell him anything. Somehow their conversation had gone in different directions until it stopped on their new professor, Leo Bennett. He had asked a lot of questions about him and if Mr. Bennett was giving the female students of Ivy Grove attention. She had happily told him how aloof he was towards everyone, but was somehow kind to her friend Mia. Their conversation had shifted to the point where she found herself telling him about how he had saved Mia from Alaric and how he had made her hit Diane yesterday. Jason had never been interested in any of her activities in life and only made sure her life was like that of a prisoner with his overprotectiveness. But yesterday, when he asked her about Mia and what she was like, Rain had told him that her friend was beautiful and was also participating in their school competition. He had then generously suggested that she should take her friend out for shopping and they could have fun in this same shopping center. But who would have thought he had set her up into coming here with her friend so he would grace the shopping center with his famous presence? Rain thought with a deep, displeased frown. Was Jason interested in Mia? Chapter 64. Use her to get to his rival. As Jason was busy flashing and posing for the camera, he spotted his sister walking into the mall with Mia Harrison. However, he pretended like he didn't see them and smiled at the young woman before him, who was requesting a photograph with him. "It's my pleasure, beautiful," he beamed at the young woman, his charming smile showcasing his gleaming, pearly white teeth. Just his smile alone was enough to make the women blush and scream with excitement. Although he had come to the shopping center, his intention was not to flirt with any woman, but rather to accomplish his objective. Jason had eagerly hoped to be assigned the mission at Ivy Grove Institute, as exposing the mole working with the Doc Kroll organization would be a game-changer for the person responsible for uncovering the truth. It would also open doors for more career advancement and the chance to meet the president. However, due to Jason's recognizable face, Neil Weiner had been chosen for the mission instead. This was something Jason could not accept. Neil Weiner doesn't deserve any of the attention he was receiving from the world. He had gotten a higher rank because of his uncle in the military. Not to mention the fact that he had killed millions of people 2 years ago because of his anger issue. Though Jason had tried to bring that incident to the news, no one was giving him the chance to speak about the incident because everyone believed it to be a tragic and sorrowful event. And because of his lack of evidence, no one would believe him that Neil Weiner, the world's hero and most important, yet mysterious soldier, was a cold-blooded murderer who killed people when angered. The evidence had been wiped off by General David, making it impossible for Jason to prove Neil's past actions. Although Jason wanted to expose Neil's true identity to the world and debunk his mysterious persona, he hesitated because he knew that by revealing the mysterious man's identity to the world, would cause Jason to be forgotten and seen as unimportant. Therefore, until he gathered enough evidence to convince the world of Neil's past actions, he decided to let Neil remain a mystery. However, one thing Jason would not allow Neil to do was allow him to find the rat in Ivy Grove Institute. The more he succeeded in completing his mission, the more he got famous without even showing who he really was to the world. Even the president had mentioned Neil and personally thanked him on TV for what he had done for their country, when Jason had never been mentioned by the president. Jason was determined to do anything to make Neil fail his mission in Ivy Grove Institute. He'd sat with his annoying sister yesterday to get some information from her about Neil, and thankfully, she had been glad to tell him everything. And from everything he'd heard from Rain, he realized his psychopath of a rival had seemed to finally show a bit of interest in a woman. He had been so pleased with his sister's information, to the point he had gifted her a brand new car, which she had refused to take because she suspected he was up to no good. Well, Jason didn't care what his sister thought, as long as he had gotten everything he needed from her. He had immediately sent one of his men to do a background check on this Mia Harrison, and he realized she was just a nobody in Zen. That alone had sparked his interest and curiosity on why his temperamental rival was getting a little involved with a woman for the first time. Jason intended to do a little test to see if Neil was really interested in the girl like he'd assumed. He had suggested for Rain to bring her shopping today so he could do his little test. When Jason noticed that his sister was approaching him, he swirled around and pretended like he had just noticed their presence in the mall. "Oh, look who's here. My pretty little sister," he mused joyously, as if excited to see her here, when in truth he didn't care about his disappointing sister that much. She was a Wallace, and instead of choosing a career in the family company, she chose to become a journalist, disgracing their family. Seeing how her brother was smiling at her like she was his favorite person in the world, Rain felt the strong urge to throw her shoes at his handsome face. He had suggested for her to bring Mia here, so literally he knew she would be here with her friend, but he brought himself to the shopping center while pretending like it was some coincidence. Who was he kidding? What is my lovely brother doing here today? Aren't you supposed to be in your office doing your work? She also put on a smile, knowing there were cameras flashing on them from different angles. One thing Rain disliked was getting attention from the media. She had chosen to be a journalist because she wanted to be the one interviewing people and not the other way around. She didn't like the media attention on her personal life, but she liked doing it to others. However, her attention seeker of a brother just had to show up today and bring all the attention on her. Having little breaks from sitting all day in an office is good for health, little sis, Jason replied with a fake, warm smile, but deep down he wanted to scold his brat of a sister for wanting to embarrass him in front of his fans. Nonetheless, knowing why he was here, he let her remarks go. "What are you doing here, Rain? Did you also come here to shop?" he asked while lovingly patting her head, as if he didn't know why she was there. "If you're here to shop, don't worry, I will pay for everything and anything you want." The little display of sibling affection in public made Jason's fans awed in envy. They couldn't help but admire how much he seemed to love and care for his sister. Though Rain rarely showed herself in front of the camera, the public knew how she looked: red hair, freckles, with beautiful large green eyes. "I wish I had a brother like Jason. He's not just a hero, but a loving brother." Hearing the people's praise of him, Jason's beam grew even wider. He walked away from the flashing cameras and his fans, while leaving behind his sweet words to them. When they walked further into the mall, Jason turned to his sister and said, "Rain, you didn't introduce me to your beautiful friend." Mia, who had been quietly following the siblings while trying as much as possible to stay invisible from the infamous Jason Wallace, was a bit taken aback to hear his words. She hadn't even thought he noticed her the whole time. When Rain refused to do the introduction, as she believed her brother already knew who Mia was, Mia smiled and introduced herself. "I'm Mia Harrison, a friend of Rain from school. It's a pleasure meeting you in person, Mr. Wallace. Oh please, drop the formalities, you can call me Jason." He held out his hand while regarding her with a strange look in his hazel eyes that made Mia a bit uncomfortable, but she still reluctantly shook his hand. As Jason shook the girl's hand, he couldn't help but admit she was pretty for a common girl from Whispering Way. And her hand felt surprisingly soft. However, knowing that she was from a common town, he made a mental note to use hand sanitizer later on. Noticing that her brother wasn't letting go of her friend's hand, Rain interjected by pulling away Mia's hand. If Jason had asked about Mia and even showed up today because he was interested in her friend, Rain would make sure she burst his bubbles. She would never allow her best friend to even think about liking someone like Jason. "You don't have to come with us to shop, Jason. Mia and I can manage just fine without you," Rain remarked calmly, while standing between them to be a barrier. Mia, who was already feeling a strange vibe with the infamous Jason, would be more than pleased if he wouldn't tag along with them. She didn't know why she had felt uncomfortable when he shook her hand and gave her that strange look, as if he was disgusted with her but was putting up with her because she was a friend of his sister. To be honest, she hadn't truly liked Jason that much, even before meeting him in person. He was that kind of annoying person that always found a reason to be showcased on news. Jason, realizing that his sister was trying to shoo him off, flashed her a charming smile and wrapped an arm around her shoulder. What kind of a brother leaves his sister to shop alone when he could be of help? "Since I have stumbled upon you two today, you can buy anything you want, and I will pay for it. Including you, Mia. Don't be shy, take anything you like in this place," he said to Mia with a smile. Mia, who wanted to decline but was not given the chance by Jason, was pulled along with Rain to the section with high-quality gowns and beautiful dresses. Specifically, he started selecting dresses for Mia to try on, insisting they would look good on her. Mia found it odd that someone like Jason was paying so much attention to her. When she tried on a tight red dress, Jason praised her warmly and urged her to choose it. However, he noticed a loose string hanging from the dress. Before Mia could go back into the dressing room, he asked her to wait so he could help fix the string and ensure the dress still looked beautiful. Before Mia could refuse, Jason was already behind her, carefully tying the strings. He took his time, aware of the cameraman he had hired to take pictures of them the entire time. He made it appear as though he was being intimate with Mia while tenderly fixing the strings, and even moved her long hair to one side of her shoulder, which made her even more uncomfortable. Jason thought excitedly, "Let's see how that psychopath would react if he knew I'm pursuing someone he's interested in. I'll send him the pictures and videos." Knowing that Neil had a short temper, Jason couldn't wait to provoke him and disrupt his mission by using Mia Harrison to his advantage. Chapter 65. Galvera Enterprise, The Arrival of the CEO. In Mirage Mesa, a tall, sleek, glass skyscraper stood tall in the middle of the city, the Galvera Enterprise. The company, that was usually lively with the staff members doing as they pleased, was now tense after the arrival of the CEO, who rarely came to the company unless he was needed for important meetings. He had placed his cousin as the company's president while he was away doing what the staff members were never informed about. Though they had heard a lot about him and how bad-tempered he was, Most of the workers had never set eyes on him, as he always walked straight into the conference room whenever he arrived. For 2 years, he hadn't set foot into the company until today, the day the official company sales between Fabian, who was the current acting CEO, and Rodrigo Enterprises was to be finalized. Everyone had been astonished at Xavier Galvera's appearance because he hadn't announced his arrival like he usually does. He had walked up into the conference room where the meeting with Rodrigo Enterprises executives were making an agreement about the shares Fabian planned to sell to them. However, before he arrived at the conference, Xavier had found the staff members of the Galvera enterprise joyously joking and laughing among themselves instead of focusing on their tasks. Everyone knew he had a dislike for working with incompetent individuals, but since he hadn't been the one running the company for the past 15 years, everyone had grown to ignore the rules and did as they pleased. His irritation had grown, and he'd immediately barked orders at them and warned, "If I hear any more chatter or laughter in here." His intense gray eyes scanned the staff menacingly before adding, "Then be prepared to find another job." The staff didn't need to be told twice to understand that the CEO of Galvera Enterprise had returned, and they immediately grasped the reason for his presence. No one dared to make another sound, and the silence stretched so long that even the softest feather falling to the ground would have been audible. They held their breaths until he passed by them and headed towards the conference room. Being aware of Fabian's actions behind the CEO's back, the staff members already knew their president was in serious trouble. And before long, they witnessed Fabian sprinting out of the conference room, his nose bleeding, closely pursued by the executives from Rodrigo Enterprises. Oh boy! I pity the board members in the conference room. Sir Xavier has always been brutal. His eyes alone can make a soldier crawl on their knees, one of the workers remarked while nervously pushing up his glasses. I hope he doesn't plan on staying for good in Mirage Mesa now that President Fabian has messed up big time. If Sir Xavier were to run the company for good, I guess we will all be dead before our time. I heard he's nothing like his late father when it comes to business. He's ruthless and heartless, replied another anxious member who was glad she wasn't in the board meeting. I wonder what's going on in the conference room. Silence hung like a pall over the 10 men seated at the conference table in the boardroom of Galvera Enterprise. A silence that was shattered as the gold clock on the wall began ominously tolling the hour of 10. No one dared to speak for fear of getting hit like the president had been punched on the nose and was fired immediately, despite being a relative. From his position at the head of the long table, Neil's gaze raked over the 10 men on both his sides who were Galvera Enterprises' board of directors. He couldn't believe what his cousin had dared to do in his absence, and yet none of them stepped out to speak some sense into Fabian or even attempted to inform him about his cousin's sudden decision to sell his shares to that bastard Rodrigo. If Neil hadn't been informed by Liam, he would have been too late in rescuing his family's hard-earned name in the country. He would have lost the control he had on the Galvera Enterprises to that Kelvin Rodrigo. Though he had changed his identity to Neil Wayner after his parents' death, he hadn't planned to forget his real identity as Xavier Galvera in Mirage Mesa. Nor did he plan to let Noah Galvera, his father's hard work, go to waste and fall into the hands of his enemy. Neil's gray eyes continued to rake over the men. Each man had been carefully selected by his father, and each possessed the 3 qualities that Noah Galvera required of his board members: intelligence, greed, and spinelessness. But because of their incompetence, he had been forced to fly down to Mirage Mesa instead of being in Ivy Grove Institute and looking for clues about the rat. I asked, Neil repeated his earlier question in a cold, clipped voice, "Were you all dumb enough to follow that son of a bitch in deceiving me today?" 4 directors nervously cleared their throats. Another reached for the crystal pitcher of ice water in the center of the table. None of them had the gall to answer, as they had been bribed not to say a word to Xavier until the deal had been made with Rodrigo. They hadn't even expected that he would find out about this, as they had all promised to keep their mouths shut, but it seemed someone had given them away. The board of directors' averted gaze and the continued meek silence ignited the rage Neil was keeping under such tenuous control. "No comments?" he asked with silky menace. "Then perhaps one of you who is not incapable of speaking altogether will explain to me why I was not informed of Fabian's disastrous decisions or his erratic behavior during the last 2 years of my absence." His gray eyes continued to move across the men, willing himself to stay patient and not make them bleed with the anger he was holding back. One of the men cleared his throat while running a finger between his shirt collar and his neck. "Your cousin said you were not to be bothered with matters here because you have better things to do than to be present in the company." He specifically said that to us, didn't he, Andrew? He asked, nodding for confirmation from the man seated beside him. The man Andrew nodded in confirmation and continued to say, "This is what Fabian said to us. Xavier is going to be overseeing our branches in the other countries while I will take over this one. My cousin is not to be bothered with the little decisions we are making here." That is exactly what he said, isn't it? 9 heads nodded in unison. Neil looked at them as he slowly rolled a pencil between his fingers. "So," he concluded in a dangerously soft voice, "not one of you bothered me. Not even when he sold a few of the Galvera's lands in Mirage Mesa and an airline for half their worth? Not even when he decided to sell all of my shares to Rodrigo? It was your family's money, and your relatives, Xavier." The man on the end held up his hands in a gesture of helplessness. "All of us combined own only a small percentage of shares in the company. The rest of the shares belong to your family. We knew what he was doing wasn't in the best interest of the company, but your family owns the enterprise. And your cousin said he wanted the company to have a better management." Red fury boiled up inside of Neil, pouring through his veins. The pencil in his hand snapped in two. "Better management?" he bit out savagely. "Well, yes," another said. "You know, how you have been away for so long. He thought you were not responsible enough to manage the company and—" Neil's hand crashed down on the table with the impact of an explosion as he surged to his feet. "Are you trying to tell me that you thought it was rational for him to give away the company's management to another enterprise so it would flourish smoothly?" He couldn't believe how incompetent all of them were. Did they really think giving away his shares to Rodrigo would make them still work here as the board of directors? Noah Galvera had employed them, and if Rodrigo took over, everything would change, and since Neil held the largest shares, the position of a CEO would be taken by someone Rodrigo assigned. A muscle throbbed in Neil's clenched jaw as he passed a final murderous look over them. "I am sure you will understand that the company no longer needs incompetent people like all of you. I don't want any of you in my enterprise anymore." He paused, maliciously enjoying their stunned looks, then continued with a colder tone. "Nor will I approve the payment of your month and annual fees for your services as directors during this past year. I don't want to see any of you in my company again. This meeting is adjourned." Disagreeing murmurs filled the room, but none of them dared to voice them out for him to hear. However, one of them unwisely chose that moment to become assertive. Xavier, it is in the bylaws of the company that directors are paid the annual sum of—" "Take me to court then." Neil spat. Turning on his heel, he stalked through the doorway into his adjoining office, followed by the man who had been seated on his right, silently observing the proceedings. "Make yourself a drink, James," Neil gritted as he stripped off his suit coat. Jerking his tie loose, he walked over to the floor-length windows of the office and stared blankly out to the magnificent city of Mirage Mesa. James glanced at the elaborate glass drinks cabinet against the glass wall, then quickly sat down in one of the 4 black velvet armchairs facing the desk. His brooding eyes were filled with pride as he looked at Neil, who was standing at the windows with his back to him, one arm braced high against the frame, his hand clenched into a fist. After several tense minutes, the hand unclenched and his arm came down. In a gesture of weary frustration, Neil flexed his broad shoulders, then ran his hand around the back of his neck, massaging the taut muscles. "I thought I wouldn't have the need to ever step foot into Mirage Mesa and deal with the company personally," he said with a bitter sigh as he turned. "Apparently, I have to pay more attention to it now and find more competent workers." He moved over to the desk and sat down in the massive, high-backed chair behind it and looked at James, his assistant and spy in the company for many years. With an expressionless face, he said, "I take it that you have no suggestions for a new president?" "Xavier," James almost pleaded, "I'm just an assistant with no practice in the other matters, and if you're asking for my opinion for the company's good, I think you'd do better coming back to Mirage Mesa and being a full-time CEO in the company instead of dealing with everything from overseas." Even though James had worked for Neil for years, he had no idea Neil was the mysterious soldier of the country, because they all knew him as Xavier Galvera, and they all believed he was doing some other business in Zen. That was why he couldn't run the company himself in Mirage Mesa. Neil was undeterred by James's opinion for him to come back to Mirage Mesa. That was something he would never consider. "I will assign a new set of board of directors before I fly back to Zen tomorrow morning. I will handle—" Neil's words were cut short by the vibration of his cell phone on his desk.